I set out to prepare for this little talk on the Anthropic Principle and Murphy's Law and Maloney's Law. Just did a little bit of research. We all know about Murphy's Law, of course, but Maloney's Law, turns out that I couldn't find anything about Maloney's Law. It's not written up anywhere. And I realized that the only reason I know about Maloney's Law is that it turned up in conversation that I'd had with Trevanian. And Trevanian, of course, did his PhD at Northwestern University under the supervision of Professor Martin Maloney of the Communication School. Although, you know, in those days it was known by the more old-fashioned title of radio, television, and sort of rhetoric that has now become the whole school of communications. And I realized that, of course, Martin Maloney was very much revered by his students, and he had a very extraordinary mind. And this idea of Maloney's Law, of course, is his, and he transmitted it to his students, but he never wrote it up as in a serious way. He himself was a serious academic and probably didn't think it's worth it. But I find it very interesting and useful for my thoughts about the Anthropic Principle. Maloney's Law is the probability of any event happening is the inverse of its desirability. Now you can see that it's in the same realm as Murphy's Law, but it's slightly different because it refers more explicitly to the internal state of the person. And the reason why this is important is we'll come to it later on in our talk. But I find it very interesting that Martin Maloney, who was a professor of communications, actually has left so little trace in the internet, at the very least, in the internet. It's very hard to find anything about him. You can find references to one book he wrote, which is about writing for the media, whereas you just giving examples of scripts, I mean amazing scripts, and ways to treat particular problems and ways to handle each different sort of media outlet and what they all require. And that's really about the only thing you can find of Maloney. Which is odd because he was a professor for more than 30 years, wrote a lot of serious works, and had a lot of students who appreciated him very much. And yet his presence, his very, very light presence has remained. I like to read you this little piece written by Roy Wood, who became Dean of the School of Communications in Northwestern in 1972. And he wrote a little piece about Martin Maloney. And it goes like this. I'll read these words. When I became Dean of the School of Communications in 1972, I decided that I'd better get to know the faculty. I met with each person to try and understand something about what they taught and something about their speciality. And that was the first time that I'd really tried to get to know Martin Maloney. You have to envisage this 32-year-old dean leaning back, puffing on his pipe and saying, "Well, Martin, what do you do?" I expected a precise statement of academic speciality. "Oh," he replied, "I look at semantics and television and detective stories and radio and magazines and persuasion and criticism and theatre and pornography and movies and comic books and records and rhetoric." An hour later, I knew just a little about the secret life of Martin Maloney. He confessed towards the end that for over 30 years he had absorbed popular culture. And for the most of that time he'd been in the closet, a very serious scholar who pursued certified academic questions. Now Roy Wood goes on to refer to a work that Martin Maloney had been engaged to write in 1979 for Oxford University Press. But he died in 1980 and the book never appeared. I contacted Oxford University Press a little while ago and they knew nothing of the book. It wasn't in their catalogues, they had no information about it whatsoever. which seems a shame. And yet, Roy Wood goes on to say, during the past week, I have tried to get back in touch with that incredible mind by rereading the manuscript of Martin's last work, Mass Media in American Popular Culture. If you haven't seen it, it will be soon out in Oxford Press. So this manuscript is somewhere, but it was never published. And I certainly know a small publisher would be very interested to get its hands on that manuscript and put it out if anyone knows where it is. It would be nice to get that information. The book is an incredible collection of what Martin has absorbed like a sponge over a long life. And in between fits of jealousy, you can only say he had the most outrageous mind you've ever encountered. So Martin Maloney, one of the early pioneers in communication and media, the whole concept of media and what it was doing to the American mind. So, Maloney's Law. Thanks to Trevanion, we know about Maloney's Law. And it's a nice little angle on the principles of Murphy's Law. Now, Murphy's Law is well known, appears in popular culture. It appeared in Christopher Nolan's film Interstellar, but it was described incorrectly. Matthew McConaughey's daughter is called Murphy, and she's getting teased at school, and he says about her name, and she says, Murphy's Law is, if it can happen, it will, which is actually nothing to do with Murphy's Law at all. Murphy's Law is when you've taken care of everything, something will still go wrong. And even more than that, it's the thing that goes wrong is the thing that will interfere with you the most. Murphy's Law is very much a sort of comment on how really the universe is just proceeding as it wants to proceed. And the efforts of the human mind to come to grapple with that they're always going to be incomplete. The human mind may try to understand what the universe is doing, but it's simply just not going to get the whole picture. Well, there are many versions of Murphy's Law, you can find them on the internet, but I have my own. My own version is, which results, I do a lot of work in the mountains on a hill farm, and I'm doing lots of different jobs. I'm welding, or I'm doing woodwork, or I'm painting, or I'm cutting down trees for firewood, or I'm making hay, or doing a lot of field work. So as a consequence, the tools have a tendency to get mixed up. And there's one thing I know for sure, is that the one tool that is the most carelessly put away is the very tool that will interfere with the next job. So both Maloney's Law and Murphy's Law sit on the other side of the equation from the Anthropic Principle. The Anthropic Principles, of course, are they're two, generally considered to be the strong and the weak. Strong says the universe, something made the universe precisely so that we could emerge. The weak one says, no, there's a whole mix of random parameters, a lot of different kinds of universes. We just happen to be that kind of universe in which our kind of life arises. The reason the supporters of the weak Anthropic Principle use this idea of life-friendly universe constants, universe parameters, which is a little bit of a spin on the idea life-friendly, and you immediately sort of shifts the argument towards the universe that we live in is in some way arranged for us. Well, this is just not true. There's nothing to suggest that our kind of life is existing in the best kind of universe for it. Maybe we're here by accident, surely. And we may our kind of life may be just hanging on to this universe by the skin of its teeth. We have no way of knowing if our kind of life would do better in a universe with slightly different parameters. I mean, the most significant parameter we have of life, or certainly of sort of evolution, is exponential growth. And exponential growth is kind of doing us in right now. We're coming up to what's called the carrying capacity, and exponential growth is changing to logistic growth up to a limit. And usually in the natural world, when you have predators preying on a lower trophic level, then the predators grow when their prey is in good supply. But when they eat it all up, then the predators die, and they die off in a sort of greater numbers than what maybe they should. That there's probably enough. Let's say there's enough prey for the predators to live at a lower rate. But generally speaking, when they fall from when they reach their carrying capacity and they collapse, their populations collapse below a level which could theoretically be sustained, and that gives their prey enough time to grow and become more numerous, so that then the predators can grow and become more numerous again, and the whole cycle repeats. Exponential growth goes into logistic growth, hits carrying capacity, collapses, and then the whole cycle goes on. Well, one could imagine perhaps a way in which evolution produces at every trophic level, rather than just one predator or a single predator or an apex predator, a community of predators that work together to kind of, sort of, instinctually manage the prey upon which they feed, so that this kind of arrangement wouldn't produce the logistic and exponential growth that's doing in our own ecology. So you can see it's possible for other universes to be more friendly for our kind of life than the one we're in. Furthermore, there are all sorts of extinction threats out there that could demolish us in a moment. I mean, not just asteroids or comets, but stellar novae, a number of different kinds of events, stellar events, as well as planetary events, could happen at sort of any moment. We are pretty much on the verge of extinction all the time. So to say that our universe, the arrangement of cosmological constants, the parameters that all exist within a very tight range to allow human life to exist, to call this life friendly is very presumptuous at least. And we have things like Murphy's Law and Maloney's Law to express this presumption, amusingly, but also in quite a significant way. Both Murphy's Law and Maloney's Law are about our internal states, our expectations. Maloney's Law is specifically about our expectation for the outcome of an event. Murphy's Law simply says that is about the delusion of taking care of everything. We expect that our behavior is sufficient to get whatever it is we want done, the job done, but it's always going to be insufficient. Our expectation is insufficient. The universe has its own way of things unfolding, and that human life is kind of in contradiction to that. The universe is certainly indifferent to what humans are doing and what they want to do, and this expresses, sort of contests the idea that we do live in a life-friendly universe at all. We don't live necessarily in a malevolent, did I get that right? Malevolent universe, but we live in a universe that's working things out in contrast to the way humans are working their own things out. So, and this is kind of significant in other ways, because if it is the case that our universe is indifferent to us and that we humans are just hanging on by the skin of their teeth, it puts a whole different slant on the preciousness of human life, the chances are, therefore, that we are going to be the only intelligence, if not in this galaxy, certainly in this, if not in this universe, in this galaxy. And that means that every single human life is unique and precious. And the whole idea that we have a culture that seems to enjoy, killing humans off is just bizarre to me. Bizarre and extreme. We are so rare. We are so individual that we need to preserve every single aspect of humanity, because who knows what resources each individual human can put into the mix, to help us survive, help us grow. It's just madness. The notion that we can murder and killing, the idea of capital punishment, for example, is extraordinary. It's clearly the idea of punishing a human for doing something that's out of madness or sickness, or it's crazy. So Murphy's Law and Maloney's Law have taken us quite far, I think, into the state of humans in the universe.